Okay, hi. Welcome everyone to this Hopkins Hour. It's great that you've been able to join us. Apologies that we were a little late getting started. My name is Julie Connolly and I've recently joined the executive group of the Hopkins Centre, and I have some responsibilities around implementation, consumer engagement and employment programs as yet, but it's just starting to build. So I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity to host today's session and introduce myself to you. Before we begin, I'd really like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands on which we meet. Today, I'm coming to you from my home, in fact, and it is on the lands of the Turrbal people. And I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and future. And I'd also like to acknowledge that it is some of the Indigenous First Nations leaders of this country who are among the people who have done such great work in enlivening debates around citizen participation in research and in program development in the health sciences, but also in a range of other academic fields. And I think we're deeply indebted to some of the work that we've done more broadly as a community of people who are interested in research. So I'm particularly grateful to those leaders within our First Nations community who have assisted us on this particular journey, which is a segue, of course, into the topic for today, which is about citizen engagement throughout Hopkins Research. There are numerous examples of this, and we have three speakers or three presentations for you today. First is Michael Norwood, and it will then be followed by Kelsey Chapman and Angel Dixon talking to you about their research into dignity. And finally, we have Camila Shirtoa and Soo Oh, who will talk to you about some of the work in HabITec. Given that we have started a little late, I'm just going to run through some of the kind of housekeeping issues really quickly for you guys. Michaela Kerr is in the background running the event for us. She is available if you have any technical issues. Likewise, she'll be helping us moderate the questions and answers. So if you want to post any questions during the presentations, we will return to them to the best of our ability toward the end. But those that we are not able to answer during the course of today's event, we will endeavour to get back to you subsequently. There is a captioning feature within Teams, so if you require that, there's a button. Again, Michaela can answer any questions about that. And if you need to pause the event at any point, you can re-engage with us subsequently. So thanks again for joining us today. It's great to be able to meet you online. Hopefully I'll have a chance to engage with you some more over the next 12 months. And now I'd really like to hand over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So as Julie mentioned, so my name is Mike and I'm here to talk to you today about some research that we completed. The aim was to create a resource or a guidebook for consumers hoping to engage in research as participants, so people with a disability hoping to engage in research as participants. But as you know, the theme for this Hopkins Hour is engaging citizens in Hopkins Research. And there's another way that we speak to this theme in that we employed a consumer reference group to help us with this research. So employing this consumer reference group added so much value to our research and ensured that the voice of the consumers were included in the methods, the materials, the outcomes and the dissemination. And we were lucky enough to have Gillian Kingsford-Smith pre-record her thoughts on this, on both parts of this engaging citizens, so on the guidebook, but also on her experience as being part of that consumer reference group. We have had some trouble with the audio. I can hear it, but no one else can. So we'll see what happens. And if we can't play that, we'll send it around sort of after the Hopkins Hour. So the resource that we created was deciding whether to participate in research, a community resource for Australians who live with a disability. So the booklet essentially was. There's plenty of resources out there for people to understand the research process from a sort of a research or academic perspective, but this booklet aimed to support potential research participants who live with a disability to make an informed decision about whether they take part in research, be empowered throughout the research process, ask questions and speak up about their individual needs to ensure researchers respect the rights of participants. And to make decisions that ensure researchers treat individuals as participants rather than just as subjects. So it also gave sort of the information and the questions to ask so that people could weigh up the costs of being involved against the benefit gained. And hopefully this booklet was aimed to help participants do this. So how do we do it? So, well, like I mentioned before, it's sort of an aside, is that we also had a consumer reference group, which was sort of vital to the way that we went about creating this resource and how we created our methods to do the research to get this resource. So the consumer reference group helped guide our approach, the questions we were asking and how we worded them, and it was that was really valuable. So as I mentioned, we had Gillian Kingsford Smith pre-record her part of this presentation. She, in this recording, she sort of spoke to both aspects of this engaging citizens in research. So she spoke about, she introduced herself, then she spoke about each of the themes in turn. She spoke about why it's important to involve consumers in research and some of her experiences. She talked about her experience on the consumer reference group. And then she talked about her thoughts on this guidebook, how she felt it could be useful and how it might be used now that it's finished. So we'll see if we can play that video now, and if the audio isn't working as it wasn't before, then we'll send it around after the Hopkins Hour. No. Okay. Okay, so it's disappointing that audio wasn't working. I can hear it, but I guess I won't play it to myself. We'll send that round after the Hopkins Hour is finished. So sorry about that. So we, like I said, so that one way we speak to the theme of engaging citizens in research was employing this consumer reference group. And once we did that, we could start working with them to develop the research materials, the methods, and work out how about we went creating this resource with the voice of consumers in that whole process. So how do we do it? Well, essentially we talked to people who live with disability about their experiences and attitudes to participating in the research. So to create this guide, together with the reference group, we first developed a survey for people with disability to answer questions based on their experience of and attitudes to being a research participant. So we asked questions around why people might participate in research and why they might decline it, what their experiences were as a research participant, so their experiences with researchers, with the research environment, the research process, and if they'd been part of research on more than one occasion, so if they had an experience of going back to the same research or in various research projects. I followed up this survey with some participants to ask for more detail through interviews, so just more details on experiences to help us get an idea of what people's experiences have been like. Now, I'm not going to present the results of that because this isn't really supposed to be a research presentation, but more a launch of this booklet, this community resource for Australians who live with a disability to help them decide whether to participate in research or not. So the results though from this research, it helped shape this booklet, it helped with the hints and tips that are given, and it's the booklet is based on these actual attitudes and experiences of people with disability who had and hadn't participated in research. So the booklet's divided into 3 parts. So before the research starts, so people making that decision to take part in research, once it's started, and once it's complete. So as you can see, it's sort of got the decision points here. It's so that it has some information about each feature, and then it has some decision points. So it's got some questions people can ask themselves, things to think about, things that they should ask the researcher if it's not clear. The deciding to participate, the first part of the booklet, includes sections on contribution, benefits, so who it benefits and if what's important to them. A lot of people wanted it to benefit other people rather than having direct benefits, but the question was is sort of what's important to you here. Risk, which include physical safety and emotional safety. Trust, so if they could trust the organisation running it, trust the researchers. Convenience, so time, how much time will it take, how much can you offer. Remuneration for that time, so again you can see there's some helpful hints, things to think about, some decision points that will help people going through the information sheet ask the right questions from the perspective of consumers. Comfort and discomfort, and travel, which was actually a really big factor in when if people have taken part in research, and if it was an enjoyable experience or not. And it's the type of thing that goes in research information sheets, but there's the level of sort of detail and this thinking about it from the participant's perspective, which is where this booklet sort of fits in. Once research has started, it was a very short section that was mostly about withdrawing and what happens with data. And once the research is finished was the final section. So that had sections on individual results, and there's you can see there, ask the researcher. It's got a list of questions people can ask the researcher. It's got some information beforehand. One thing that came up in sort of the research was that a lot of people felt happy with the level of contact in the deciding to take part and during, but once the research had finished, no matter what was sort of written on information sheets, sort of they might not have even received the results or heard back. And I think the length of time between the research taking place and the results is something that is always long, and maybe it's not fully clear to participants. And the last section was the overall research results. So again, it's got some information there, and then some questions that people can ask the researcher if they need more information. So what are our immediate hopes for this resource? Well, apart from it being used by consumers and helping consumers make these decisions and have that sort of more informed consent, I suppose, when they take part, we'd hope it could be distributed by researchers to participants with that information sheet. But we also hope researchers would use it in its current form, which is aimed at the consumer. It would still help researchers know sort of what barriers to participation exist for consumers. So that would help researchers plan their research and provide the right information to hopefully knock down some of those barriers and get more people involved. And they'll also help researchers know what is most important to make participants comfortable. It would be great if it could be fully adapted as a research resource. This would be in the sort of the far future. And even better, maybe an adaptation for ethics committees, or so ethics committees can become aware of this and sort of know that participants are being fully informed and have that sort of empowered position to make proper informed consent. And the great thing is that it means that all of these things, all this research planning and ethics committees, means that the information they're getting is coming from the voices of the actual participant population. So when one thing we wanted to do was create a video. So the resource itself, we tried to keep it simple and palatable and easy to get through, but a more accessible sort of option would be we got it down to sort of 2 minutes. Daniel Harvey created a great video, which could be as a sort of supplement to the resource. It could be a sort of a gateway to use a resource if people are interested. And I'll try and play it now, but again, we'll see what happens with the audio, and if not, we'll send it around. Okay, so sorry about that with the audio again. We'll try and send it around afterwards. So get in touch if you've got any thoughts on the resource and ideas how to share, or how it could be used immediately or in the future. There's a chance for, I think, Q&A at the end, but then also just acknowledge that this book, well, there's a whole research team there. There was the consumer reference group listed. We had Joanne Pameta, who helped design the booklet, Daniel Harvey with that video, and all the participants and supporting organisations, of course. So I'm now going to hand over to Angel Dixon OAM, who is the citizen co-researcher on the Dignity project.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to check, Mikala, can you hear me? Brilliant. Thank you for all your work in the background there. Firstly, thank you for having us, and thank you for that first presentation. That was really enlightening and exciting to hear about other projects that are happening in this space. My partner in this, Kelsey, will be presenting half of this presentation as well. So halfway through, you will be not seeing me anymore and you'll be seeing Kelsey. At the start of each slide, I'm going to just describe briefly what is on each slide, just for accessibility purposes, because I know that this presentation hasn't been sent out to everyone ahead of time. So on our first slide, we have an image of a mix of diverse people in what seems like a very bright and great room. And we have a slide that says the Hopkins Centre, the Dignity Project, and engaging people with disability in research. So a few months ago, Michelle asked us to reflect on the past 18 months of our experiences with the Dignity Project. We'd like to acknowledge our wider team, Kevin Cox, Elizabeth Kendall, Carolyn Elwich, Joanne Keck-Pimenta, Hannah Gorn, Riley Sulek, and Christy Hogan for joining us on this journey of learning and understanding, which has far exceeded our vision for such a small pilot study. We've used a variety of methods to uncover some powerful stories and experiences about people's dignity, and we've also been on a very iterative journey of learning throughout our citizen science project and what engaging consumers in research may look like from a human rights and critical disability theory perspective. It's on this journey that we had some key learnings, and we'd like to share those with you today. So on our next slide, we've got our team and our funders. So we need to acknowledge the Motor Accident Insurance Commission, the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist, and the Department of Transport and Main Roads. Thank you, thank you. And on our third slide, we have what we knew about engaging with consumers. We have methodological jargon, remuneration, and history, and I'm going to be talking through those 2 points. So everyone we connected with could recognise the importance of citizen engagement in research. I think everyone can. It's one of the driving forces that the Hopkins Centre is striving for across research streams. But best practice for meaningful engagement is often obscured in theory and in the use of jargon, like co-design, emancipatory research, consumer engagement, consultation, reference or advisory groups, citizen science, which is our methodology, and in the application, depending on existing systems in place, the understanding of disability for a myriad of reasons, and many other things within a team. There's a lack of standardised and internationally recognised protocols for citizen engagement, particularly when relating to people with disability. Perspectives about the value of citizens' contribution to research greatly differs as well. Some citizen researchers are remunerated with gift cards, others with salaries, others not at all. And this is problematic for people with disability who were historically objects of research, conducted without the protection or the input of the disabled community. People with disability in research are often, or in general, are often patronised, tokenised and limited, which is also true of some experiences when engaging in research. So with our knowledge of the literature, our own experiences, and a vision of an ideal, we got started on our project. And on our fourth slide, we have what we did. Values and commitment statement, being disruptive, foundations in the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, and user testing and collecting data inclusively. And an awesome little drawing of what our flow looked like. So after observing the differences in the application of citizen engagement and citizen science at the Hopkins Centre, we wanted to draw on universal design and inclusive design concepts to pilot some new way of working. Pushing the envelope and being disruptive are part of the mandate of critical disability theory and the disability rights movement, and that certainly aligned with our goal of breaking down overt and covert barriers to participation. So before embarking on our research, we decided to develop a short values and commitment statement for operational guidance and transparency. And the living document has foundational values and shows our guiding body, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, the language, accessibility, and messaging. What we were striving to do is not unlike protocols for working with CALD people or people from CALD communities or First Peoples, but it's actually lacking for the disabled community. Just excuse me for a moment, I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. So having our foundations rooted in the CRPD was a really important part to ensuring that we were promoting contemporary understandings of disability and that we were adhering to a rights-based framework. It was also important for us to negotiate a shared vision of our research. So both Kelsey and I negotiated a lot. We consciously acknowledged the importance of my own experience as a person with disability and ensured that our negotiation of research aims, methods of data collection, data analysis, and ongoing critical reflections enabled inclusive and dignified engagement of citizen scientists, including myself, as well as inclusive and accessible participation for our participants. We engaged the Centre for Accessibility's Dr. Scott Hollier to do some user testing on our data collection platform, which helped us to work out many options of methods of participation, including video, audio, standard Word documents, and a whole bunch of other things. And then we got to it. And I'm going to hand over to Kelsey.
Okay, I just needed to make sure I unmuted. So our next slide says what we learned along the way. And it says disability is heterogeneous, experience of disability, diagnosis, symptoms, impairment, lifestyle, culture. Meaningful engagement can still be tokenistic, building capacity and confidence, financial valuing lived experience in the currency of academia. And we have a quote, 2 quotes actually, from participants on the right-hand side. One says, "I felt like an object after my accident and gradually over the years becoming more human and found coming into the NDIS, I was an object again. I was financial capital. I was just an object, invisible, but then I became a commodity." And our second quote that says, "It took a long time for me to learn my voice. We're not trained as people living with this. We're not trained to know what our needs are or to ask for our needs." So in academia and clinical settings, we tend to look for a framework, approach, or method, or at least that's what I did starting out with this project, that best suits most people, which we feel is actually part of the confusion around citizen science or consumer engagement, particularly for people with disability. Disability is not homogeneous, and that might seem like a very obvious takeaway, yet it's something we constantly confronted during our process and our research. It's about more than individual impairment, although the realities of impairment factor into experience as well. Each citizen or consumer has an individual perspective, identity, and experience in their journey living with impairment and disability. And this impacts on how they engage with research and how they want to be engaged with. It's important to upholding each individual's right to self-identify what terminology, pronouns, and language is best for them as a starting point. The simple question we used to ask everyone to ensure equity and individual preference was prioritized was, what do you need to participate? The important part in this step is then to be flexible on budget to procure tools needed to engage, be flexible in the ways that you meet and engage, providing opportunities for upskilling your citizen scientists to ensure engagement is equitable as well. And this was true both for Angel and our other citizen scientists and also our participants as well. At a citizen science level, this step was particularly important as employment in research often presents ongoing barriers to people with disability. Meeting citizen scientists where they're at, being flexible in approach, enables a more dignified level of engagement, which we learned has great impact on your research outcomes over time. Meaningful engagement can still be tokenistic. there is an element observed specifically relating to the engagement of citizens with disability in research that relates to a person's desire to remedy the problems, barriers, or trauma they may have encountered in their own journey. And they may be simply grateful for the opportunity to be involved. But this can often be unintentionally exploited by well-meaning researchers. So to avoid that, adequate, transparent, and consistent remuneration for a person's lived experience has a flow-on effect, and it's quite important as a tool to not only enhance research, but to grow the capacity for individual citizen researchers and the research team alike. This also extends to the currency of academia in things like authorship and being a named investigator on your project. Oh, and the last little piece I missed, sorry, was advocacy, which we sometimes see as a dirty word in academia because it comes when it comes to challenging traditional ways of working, but it's something that could be required at every phase, and that's why our guiding principles are so important. So what we know, I guess, now at the end of this process, this slide says the impact of feeling comfortable, sharing mutual experience, values rooted in disability theory and human rights, acknowledgement, witnessing, and dignity. And there's a quote that says the overall feel was one of compassion, resilience, and a deep connection to each other ensued. Limbic resonance at its most beautiful, gracefully led by Angel. It made me feel, wait for it, dignified. And that was from one of our focus group participants reflecting on the experience. So for me, it seems we created an environment where participants felt really comfortable to share their experiences. And I can't affirm this experience enough from my perspective, particularly in comparison to other experiences in research and data collection. The essence and vulnerability that was shared during the different phases of our data collection provided highly rich narratives and highlighted the importance of establishing a citizen scientist as the lead in the data collection processes. People with disability may feel less comfortable interacting and sharing with a non-disabled researcher. And our experience was that our participants were unguarded in their sharing and were able to build a collective feeling of dignity on a deeper level, which resulted in more robust and meaningful data. The process of our data collection and research being led by a person with disability was instrumental in the coordination and running of our focus group and cemented that deeper level of participation, which we say included tears, laughs, and a lot of robust sharing. And that has led to us uncovering what we feel is a really unique area of dignity in our data collection. To put it plainly, people with disability are often patronized, erased, and silenced in all aspects of their lives. Acknowledgement emerged as an overwhelming theme from our data, and fundamental to dignity is the acknowledgement and witnessing of a person's value and inherent humanity, which then requires the realization of their human rights. Dignity is at once inherent and contingent, meaning that although all people are entitled to dignity, it can be violated by interactions with systems, structures, environments, and other people. And this is particularly true for people with disability, who, when they aren't acknowledged, are erased as the authority of their lives. Our key solution as we move forward from our learnings of both our research and the way that we did our research, and we hope that you might consider embedding in your own process, is to first acknowledge the value of lived experience. Then serve as a witness to the fact that people with disability are the experts of their own experience. And as such, non-disabled researchers shouldn't do research without people with disability. And when they do, they should conduct meaningful, dignified citizen science, and they're opening up their research process to a fulfillment of robust experiential data that will enrich the lives of the community and beyond. And that's it. And would like to now hand over to Soo Oh, who's the clinician, an occupational therapist, and one of the leads of HabITec.
Hello everyone, my name is Sue, and in the room I'm joined by Camila, who is our research lead for HabITec, and we're also joined by Paul Robinson, and he's one of our ambassadors at HabITec. And today we'll be talking about how HabITec engages citizens in some of the work that we have been doing and that we are continuing on doing in different elements as well. So firstly, I guess, just in terms of our role and importance of HabITec, we are focusing on looking at giving people with, or not just people with disabilities, but people working within this space, so clinicians, engineers and people from non-healthcare sectors to access technology, but also figure out how technology could be best used for people with disabilities, and also in a clinical setting. We're wanting to look at having some technical solutions in the context of course, the environment of a clinical setting and rehabilitation, but also within the home environment, but looking at how people with disabilities in the community, whether it be return to work or for leisure activities, to access technology and to continue to access that technology, work with people who can make tailored solutions and bespoke solutions for people, so that we don't have a lot of wasted technology, and that it's been designed and used for that particular purpose. So in some of our research, we've been looking at what some of those demands are. So when we ran the HabITec lab, when we did our pilot, we looked at what some of the demands are for people in an inpatient setting. We've also been doing some work around people who are within the community, and what some of the demands are and what kind of education and resources are also needed, which has been highlighted by people with disabilities who are in need of some of this technology as well. So when we first started HabITec, we had a look at how, what kind of were our priorities. What were some of the initial things that we wanted, or that people with disabilities wanted? So we had lots of discussions with Justin and Paul, just thinking about, what were some of the current issues. We met with the researchers to see what the research was saying. We also met with a lot of the people with different disciplines, so engineers and your designers, to think about, well, what are some of those things that they were wanting to design and where some of those starting points were. And so I guess within this space, we've done a lot of capacity building where we've also done some work around providing education to different disciplines at a tertiary level, and having Paul and Justin talk to people in engineering and in design. And Paul is also an engineering student himself. To think about, where that starting point is and what co-design really looks like, and what it could look like, where some of the gaps are. So we've been doing a lot of work within this space. Just some of the examples that we wanted to provide here is just within the hospital too. We've been doing, and we've always done this actually, where we've had lots of citizen-led projects. So you have a particular situation, a particular piece of technology, and we're not only wanting to find a solution for the here and now at that time, but of course those people's needs change as they're in rehabilitation, and what could be a sustainable option for when people go home, so that it's easily replaceable, it's easily maintained, and of course that it's easily accessible, and then also finding ways for people to access it from a funding perspective as well. One of the things that an example of one of the things that we've been able to do in HabITec is to link with tertiary institutions. So ADAPT was one of the organisations, which is at Griffith University, and they're designers who have access to lots of different types of 3D printers and scanners, and we were able to do a student project, and that was really interesting and so valuable, where we have not just health students in the clinical space, But it's a wonderful opportunity for people from other disciplines and other students within those disciplines to work with our students to come up with solutions. So that was one of the projects that we did, to have a look at a joystick cover. As you can see on the left, we've used some non-slip matting that we got from Kmart, and some micropore. And we gathered information from the patient at that time, and she wanted something that was a little bit more appealing to the eye, you know, depending on her mood and whatever, and also something that was durable, and it became slippery, you know, when you're sweating on your chin. So that was a joystick cover that we were able to put on, and then it could go into the dishwasher for regular cleaning. So that was good from an infection control perspective as well. So that was just a bit of a prototype that we had made. Another example that we're doing a lot of work with at the moment. So this is Cam. He's from an organisation called Atengi, and the OT part is occupational therapy, and the ENGI is for engineering. And they were the guys that there were two of the guys that used to work at TADQ, for those who know who they are. And so two guys have kind of like branched out, and they're doing a lot of the custom make sort of stuff as well. So they've been able to come into our clinical setting. So that's an image of a patient who is an architect, and for him to be able to draw and have a writing splint was really important, and for him to have something that was a bit slick and easy to access whilst he was at work was really important for him. So we took a couple of molds, and you know, we really had to think about how, you know, what kind of things were important for him as well. And we've also had a look at a mobile arm support, something that's portable, but also for him that's, I think sometimes when you buy those off the shelf, not all the parts are relevant to that individual. So it's a wonderful opportunity for people to kind of understand exactly what they need and how it needs to be used within the context of their situation and also their environment. It's also a great opportunity in our clinical setting to, you know, to do some education and some learning, and for all of us to gain experience in each of our roles. You know, myself as the clinician, the person who is obviously at the centre, to determine what is important, what the priorities are, and then for those people who can provide their level of technical expertise into the mix, and it's you know, for everyone to have an opportunity to problem solve and troubleshoot, and then of course to make those connections and those networks, so that when people leave, they've got access to that person or that team of people as their needs change or their environment changes, so they've got a sustainable option as well. Just during this process, we also make some resources so that, of course, we can share with other people. So other patients or other people with disabilities in the community who may benefit from some of these experiences. So I guess one of our roles in HabITec is to share the information, make people aware of what is available as much as possible. So these are some of the resources that we have been able to create with our current patients, and they're obviously available for us. Able to share. One of the things that we're doing a lot of at the moment is the peer-led sessions. So this is a lovely photo of, we had a Bluetooth operated bed recently that it was compatible with somebody's voice control on an iPad, and it was trialed successfully. And then so the next person who was trialing that bed, they were able to kind of demonstrate what they were able to do, and we really benefit from that because as clinicians, I feel like we know what is available and we have some understanding of it, but it's the lived experience that is so valuable, and we have that lovely opportunity within the hospital for somebody to share with another person and to learn and to problem solve. So we've done a lot of work around student placements, educating not just our allied health professionals, but those students from the other disciplines as well. And we've really valued this, and it's obviously a space where people are wanting to do a lot of work in when they're designing or researching, to have a look at that too. And I've just spoken about this slide, so I'll just hand over to Camila.
All right, and just to finish a few more aspects of how we are engaging with citizens at HabITec. If you're familiar with the idea of a hackathon, so hackathons tend to be very intense development sessions, usually used a lot in software, but also in engineering and design. And typically we try to do very quick prototypes and turnover solutions for challenges that people have. And in our case at HabITec, we like to do that around challenges that are presented by people with disabilities. And so we just connect the right people together to make this happen. Lastly, we also have our HabITec website that's also run by Joe and Justin, our ambassadors, where we try to put out either new information about technologies that are existing or new pieces of research that could be interesting to people, and also considering allowing also us as researchers to write in collaboration with the consumers. And in the future, we want to explore co-design methods. So how do we reach out to wider users of technology? And then also, how do we continue capturing current demands, not just what Soo already did so far in the pilot, but also in other populations as well. So that's all we have for you. Thanks a lot. I'm going to hand it over to Julie again.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks to all our presenters, actually. They were wonderful presentations, and I feel both challenged and inspired. I think that the presentations were amazing and very moving. We've run a little bit longer than our original agenda suggested that we would, and I've been able to extract just a few questions from some of the comments that have been made. So what I'm going to do now is pose them to our presenters, and then we'll wrap up. As indicated at the very beginning of the session, if there are some questions that we can't get to in this time for discussion, we will attempt to respond to those subsequently. So feel free to keep writing your questions even if I can't get to them. So I thought, Mike, we would start with you. There was a really interesting question about how to use the booklet and the research that you did for forms of engagement outside of research. Do you think it has applicability to other contexts in which consumer and citizen engagement takes place?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think it does, because in relation to sort of consultation with institutions or organisations, I think the things, we'd have to actually ask one of the consumers to get maybe a more valid answer, but I think weighing up and thinking about the benefits and having ideas from past consumers about what those benefits might be, understanding if you feel you can contribute to it, the time, with all of these types of things, there'll be, a lot of it was just practical things, there'll be the time taken, the travel needed. So I think the same sort of questions and the same sort of practical information that researchers and other organisations try and provide, they'll still be relevant. And even the sort of the throughout that process, and once a process is finished, what happens with the information they've given, with the consultation or the data, I think all of those would still be relevant. But yeah, I think to get maybe the full answer, we'd have to ask one of the consumer reference group members. But no, definitely, I think that's all relevant still.
Fantastic, thank you for that response. So that was very much about applying the principles, but doing so in a way that is engaged and inclusive, which is consistent with the method that you articulated. So thank you for that, Mike. Angel, I'd like to direct a question to you now, if that's okay. Someone asked about really practical ways to acknowledge and recognise, as you indicated, lived experience. Could you take that question for us?
It's a great question. obviously there's no one size fits all, as we discussed in our presentation. I think the biggest thing for me on projects that I work on outside of here as well is that values and commitment statement at the beginning of a project that affirms or that just creates transparency really between people on a team, and really affirms the importance of how the team feels about lived experience. And that really bolsters a person's confidence coming into a new team and feeling comfortable sharing their experience as well, because sometimes, particularly in research, when we're uncovering really icky stuff, particularly around dignity, we've uncovered some pretty tricky things, and it can be a scary place to share. So I think from the get-go, having some kind of transparent information, like a handbook that Michael's been discussing, or like our values and commitment framework, using something like that to really get the conversation going is really helpful.
Thank you. I have a personal follow-up, which I might ask later, but Kelsey, I'm about to ask you a different question, but just before I did, would you like to add anything further to what Angel has suggested to us in terms of the importance of being really explicit about acknowledging lived experience in research teams?
Sure, thanks, Julie. Just to add into what Angel said, I think speaking in the currency of academia, to me, as someone who is an academic, is important. So having Angel, for example, with our project, established as a co-lead in the research and a part of all of the decision-making processes, and doing that very transparently and openly, I think is very important. And that's a good other first step in recognizing that value, and also in compensating your consumers. So Angel is engaged as an employee, and she's not a volunteer, and we're not paying her in gift cards. And I think for me personally, and for our project, putting our money where our mouth is really important. And you can do that through compensating people with lived experience at a fair market rate.
That is fantastic, and actually leads very nicely into the next question, which someone posed in the circumstance where they don't have significant budget to undertake the research. So might you have a response to that?
Sure. I think the Dignity Project started out with $30,000. So I think Angel and I are pretty good at making things work with very limited budget. And I guess part of that is just being flexible enough to make room in your limited budget. So whatever your financial resources might be, there are probably some ways that you could engage a consumer as a research assistant or as a consultant on the project. There are flexible methods for engaging that way. There are also ways to engage consumers when you don't have a large budget through gift cards, but it's all about acknowledging the citizen's preference and asking them how they want to be engaged, and then trying to be flexible. And actually, just to share a quick story, Julie, we approached a group of citizens to engage with the project we're doing out of TMR. And one citizen came back and said, well, actually, no, this type of engagement is not a way that I want to be involved with. This is how I would like to be engaged. And so just coming back to that person and saying, I'm really sorry, we actually don't have a budget to engage with you in that way at this time, and acknowledging the fact that there are limitations, but saying when we do have an appropriate budget or a way to engage with you in a dignified way, we would like to do that. So I think that's also a way to acknowledge a limit.
Thank you, Kelsey, and that repeats the important thing about transparency from the outset as a really important way of signalling your commitment to dignified engagement with people. So thank you. As we've been discussing, there have been a couple of more comments that have popped up. Again, these are related to Michael's project. So Mike, I'm just going to throw these to you, but there were two things. One, which was about the linguistic or the language accessibility question when you produce a resource such as this, knowing that we live in a country that has people speaking so many different languages. And then there was another comment that someone put up, I believe who is a citizen researcher, in fact, who indicated that yes, in light of the question that I asked earlier, it's enormously important for other forms of engagement, not just research, to think through the principles that you've articulated, Mike. But if you could answer the question about language accessibility, language services, that would be great.
Thanks, Julie. So, sorry, do you mean in terms of different languages or just the language we used?
Yes. Sorry that I was unclear. I believe the question was about different languages, so for CALD and Indigenous communities.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great sort of progression for the booklet. So we don't have the booklet in any other languages at the moment, or in presented for these groups, but that would be a really great next step if that was possible for us to do, to engage citizens from those groups specifically and have them input and create sort of and make it specific. For that would be really a great idea. So I think it's a good idea, but at the moment we haven't actually been able to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I really hope that I haven't missed any questions that were for Sue and Camila. I don't think I have. I think we're almost at the conclusion of today's session. So what I'd like to do is just wrap up really quickly. And again, thank all of our presenters. Thanks to Makala, who's been at the back end making this all possible for us. Thanks to the Hopkins Centre for realising that this is such an important issue, and it's great that we've been able to take an opportunity to discuss some of the really interesting work that's taking place. And I suppose I'd like to finish by just mentioning that I thought that Sue and Camila's presentation was really challenging. I think working out highly individualised responses to people's needs in situ using technology that is responsive is quite an extraordinary thing to do. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. But thank you all for your contributions to date. I think we're just about out of time, but we do have a minute or two left if any of our presenters have something final that they would like to say. Okay, they've stayed on mute, so I will imagine that they're ready for us to finish up. So thank you all for your contributions, and I'll finish there. Thank you.